Hi, Jocelyn. Okay, there are enough of us here that I think we can go ahead and get started. Okay, so we are in the mapping a controversy kind of portion of our class. We've already completed the formal research summary. So now we're moving into our second essay. And we talked about some stuff yesterday or our last class, thesis and introductory paragraphs. And now we're going to talk about something called synthesis. Hi, James. So if you guys took AP language in the past, you are probably familiar with synthesis because that is one of the essay questions you had to respond to. And if you've taken science, you've probably talked about synthesis as well. So let's talk about what synthesis means in this class. So synthesis comes from some Latin roots, and syn means together. And a thesis is a theory or a proposal. So synthesis means taking different theories, proposals, ideas, and putting them together. All right, so that's what we're doing in this paper. We're taking different things and we're putting them together. So if you think about this in AP language, that's exactly what this does. You were to take some different viewpoints and weave them together into an essay. In science, it's the same thing. Think about photosynthesis and what that does. Photo means light. So with photosynthesis, which is what plants do, they take light and other things and they blend them together to create food for the plant. All right, so just get that idea of synthesis. It's different things that we're bringing and joining together to create something new. So here are some key terms. If you have got a note card or a notebook where you keep notes or a pen and paper, I suggest writing these key terms down because we're going to keep talking about them and it's just a good idea to know them. These slides will be posted in the classroom in case you don't get them all written down so you can go back and write them. And of course, I'll post this video by the end of the day today. Okay, so here are key terms, which again, I suggest that you write down. The first one is synthesis. That's what we just talked about. It's the combining of different parts to make something new. Another term is controversy, and that's something people argue about in public. Then we have stakeholders, and these are people who are directly affected by the outcome of the controversy. They have something at stake. They have something to gain or lose based on the outcome of this disagreement. And then we have context. And we looked at root words when we first talked about context, and that root word con, C-O-N, that means with. So context is everything that goes along with the text that you're looking at. Who is talking? What are they responding to? What prompted them to speak right now? And that leads us into our next word, which is exigency. That is the immediate event that has led to this recent debate. Last class period, I talked about the Black Lives Matter movement. And while that's been around for many years, what gave it exigency in 2020 is the murder of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and the shooting of Jacob Blake. And that moment when George Floyd was murdered really brought that whole thing back into the public discussion. Everybody started talking about this again, and we started having marches and movements. So whatever your controversy is, what is it that is bringing it back into the public? Why are we talking about it now? What happened? I don't know if anybody in this class is studying foster care, but one thing that happened that brought foster care back into the public debate is the documentary on Netflix, The Trials of Gabriel Union. And so that is the exigency. That documentary is what launched this conversation back into the public space. Okay, let me give you guys a minute to write down these terms. Take a screenshot with your computer or with your phone. Okay, I hope everybody got a chance to get these written down. If not, I'll post these slides in Google Classroom and you can pull them up there. Okay, so last class period, I asked you guys to do a couple of things. And so by this point, you should have completed a thesis using the thesis template in 3.1.1. And that thesis should be about the same controversy that you've been writing about. That topic, that controversy, is what I want you to stick with all semester. Now, if you decided you don't like it and you want to pick a new controversy, that is fine. But I just feel like it'd be so much easier to stick with what you're already working on. The other thing I asked you to do last class period was to gather the information you need for an introductory paragraph. There was an assignment and a discussion board that helped you with that. And that was in 3.1.2. So those things should be done if you are sticking on the time schedule I have created. What we're going to talk about today is gathering some new sources, synthesizing the sources by stakeholder, and synthesizing the sources by viewpoint. And just a look at where we're headed, this whole paper needs to be submitted to UT on October 29th, which is Thursday. Not this Thursday, but it's a Thursday. Okay, so to gather sources. For this paper, this new paper, you need at least 3 sources. At least 2 of those sources must be viewpoints. Now, you already have 1 viewpoint. That means that you need to get at least 2 more sources, and at least 1 of those has to be a viewpoint. We struggled last time picking viewpoint articles, okay? So let's talk about how you can tell if something is a viewpoint or if something is just informational. So if it's an informational article, it provides information. It might discuss viewpoints, but those discussions will always be in the form of quotes and attribution. It won't directly say pizza is good. Instead, it'll say, according to Miss Ritchie, pizza is good. Miss Ritchie thinks pizza is good. Pizza is good, Miss Ritchie said. So it will always attribute those things, those viewpoints, to a source. So if you see something doing that, that should be a red flag waving that we are looking at an information article. A viewpoint source is different. A viewpoint source uses first and second person pronouns. It'll say I, me, we, and you, and us. It'll say those words in there. It'll say, I think pizza is good. We all like pizza. You know that pizza is one of the best foods, right? So it'll talk like that. I don't need to attribute it. It's my idea because it's my writing, because it's a viewpoint, okay? It'll make claims without attribution. So those are some general kind of things to think about when you're looking at a source. How is it talking about the claims in the viewpoint? If you see first person pronouns and they aren't in quotation marks, you're probably looking at a viewpoint. I have something that will help you with this. If you go into our classroom under classwork, you will see, well, I want you to see it, but you will see, let me reuse this post from my other class. You'll see something called viewpoint versus information. And in that, there is a sheet of paper. It's a Google Doc, actually. And that Google Doc has got straight information from UT about how to distinguish or tell the difference between a viewpoint and an informational source. So it talks about using first and second person pronouns. It talks about expressing ideas, including strong language. And then it talks about informational articles and what those entail. So that is for you. That is located for you in the mapping a controversy. It's called Viewpoint versus Information, and it's right here for you. Okay? So that should help you. Okay, at this point, let me stop. Does anybody have any questions for me?
So technically, when you say a viewpoint article, you mean like an opinionated article?
I do. Yep, I do. I mean an opinion or an editorial. That's why I had you guys submit those articles to me last time so I could check them and make sure you were doing the right type of article.
Okay, so I wrote about, the, like, women getting the same educational opportunities as men, right?
Mm-hmm.
So to get another viewpoint, I would have to talk about men. Why?
I'm so glad you asked that. Yeah. So if you think about a controversy, right, it's got a lot of different sides to it. And you don't want to find the same side. You want to find a different side, something that's going to take your argument a step further. So it could be from the viewpoint of men. It could be from the viewpoint of women who say, we don't need this. It could be from the viewpoint of a university that says we're doing the best we can, right?
Yeah.
So those are all different stakeholders within the same controversy. It doesn't just have to be man, woman. It doesn't have to be binary like that. It could be other things as well.
Or could it be like somebody claiming that men are the minority instead of women?
It could.
Oh, okay.
All of those are different voices in the same controversy. And this paper isn't asking you to get every voice, but it is asking you to get different voices.
Okay, so 2 different viewpoints and one more source, right?
And one more that's informational. And the reason why you want an informational source is because you've got to attribute everything in your paper, and you're going to have to give some background. Why this is a controversy, how long this has been going on, right? And you're going to find that information in the informational article, much more than you're going to find it in the viewpoint article. Does that make sense?
Yes, kind of. Now I have to I don't know how to put it all together in a paper.
Well, I am going to help you with that. That is what we're talking about. And I have templates that you will fill out that will also help you. So, I mean, if you feel overwhelmed and confused, this is a hard thing that you're doing, right? So just keep that in mind and you know, just keep pushing forward and doing the best that you can. And that's really all that I or anybody else can ask of you to do. And you're learning as you do this. Even though it seems like maybe you're not and you're not doing it right, you are. You are making progress. I can tell already where your thinking and writing is way above where you were on day 1 of this class. I have seen the difference. Okay, so let's talk about, okay. So also for gathering sources, just like you submitted them to me last time, you're going to submit them again. So if you go into our Google Classroom, there is something called Mapping a Controversy Sources. When you go in there, there is a Google form. And what I'm asking you for is the same stuff. What are you researching? And then what's your first source? Now this should be what you used last paper, okay? Now you need a second viewpoint or stakeholder text. You need an informational text. And then here is a bonus. You can add a third viewpoint source because just like Trishala and I just talked about, there might be multiple sources with different opinions on the same thing, okay? And so kind of like the more viewpoints you have, the more stuff you're going to have to say, the easier it's going to be to write a paper that's 4 to 6 pages long, okay? So if you find another source, I'll give you extra credit, and I think that that will strengthen your paper. Okay, so let's talk about what synthesizing is. I said it's taking different parts and it's making something new. So let me just do a little demonstration for you. I have 3 Christmas ribbons. I've got this really pretty red and gold one. I have holly berries, right? Very pretty. And then I have Christmas trees, right? So they're just 3 different types of ribbon right now. But if I take them and weave them together, I can make a braid, right? Just like we do with hair. So I can take some information from this source, and then I can talk about some information from another source, and then I can talk about information from another source. And then I can go back to my first source and talk a little bit more about the author and what they think. And then I can say maybe how a different author feels about the same subject and what they have in common. And maybe I can take a different source and do the same thing. And all I'm doing is I'm just layering it, right? Just like I would a braid. And when I'm done, I have this braid of ribbons, this braid of ideas that are woven together. So that's what you're going to do with your paper. You're going to take a little bit from this source and a little bit from this source and a little bit from this source, and you're going to kind of talk about them back and forth. Because if we didn't do that, if we just left them as 3 ribbons, that's pretty boring, right? It's not like I'm going to talk about this one, put it away, talk about this one, put it away, talk about this one. That's not as interesting to your reader. It's not as sophisticated. So we weave them together because that makes it more interesting and gives us a clear idea of kind of the big picture we're looking at. And we do that by explaining what's important, demonstrating key points of the controversy, and showing the reader how it all fits together. All right. Let's look at what Canvas says about synthesizing sources right now. Here, I will drop the link for you in the chat if you wanted to go to Canvas on your own and see what I'm talking about. Okay, so if we are synthesizing 3 viewpoints, you can see that Canvas has this interesting little drawing, right? And it says synthesizing information that involves putting items in relation to one another, drawing connections and making comparisons. And I'm going to read this to you because I think it demonstrates a little bit about what synthesis should and shouldn't be. As you can probably imagine, a series of summaries presented one after the other can be confusing and a little boring. John wants capital punishment in Texas. Mary wants to permit lethal injections, but with a new drug combination. And Eddie wants to keep the death penalty exactly as it is. But to make this controversy interesting and to give your reader a clear view of the big picture, you have to synthesize. Explain what's the most important part, demonstrate the key points, and then show how everything fits together. You guys cannot see what I'm looking at. I'm so sorry. This is the page in Canvas. Okay. Anybody have any questions yet? Okay. And let's talk about one way we can weave those ideas together, and that is by synthesizing by stakeholder. This is maybe the most obvious and most effective strategy, and it's taking the different stakeholders, looking at the different stakeholders, kind of what they have in common. It allows the readers to make connections among the interests and viewpoints of different stakeholders, but it does have some drawbacks. If you focus on each stakeholder separately, it's hard to relate those viewpoints to each other. And you might overlook the most interesting part, which is sometimes different stakeholders, different interests actually have the same position. Let's look at what I mean. Here is page 3.2.1 in Canvas. And if you'll go here with me, you'll see a rather lengthy discussion of what this means, which you guys can totally read on your own if you need more information or if you're confused. Here's an example. Okay. Maybe focusing on the stakeholders shows your reader the connections among these people's interests and their viewpoints. No other strategy, for example, will clearly show us that a petroleum industry executives favor hydrofracking because their companies stand to make a lot of money from this drilling technique, or that environmentalists oppose hydrofracking because they fear it will damage the local ecosystem, which they value deeply. So here you have different stakeholders, right, with different viewpoints on it, and you can illustrate that in your paper by looking at each one. At the bottom, you'll see class activity, synthesizing on focusing by stakeholders discussion forum. When you go here, you'll see a template. It's 2 paragraphs, and it walks you through exactly how to take different stakeholders and synthesize them, weave their views together, okay? So you're gonna do that, and you can see that I've got one student who's already started. Okay, any questions so far? Okay, so that's one way to do it, is to look at the different stakeholders and then kind of weave them together. This stakeholder says this stakeholder says this, let's look at why. Here's another way to think about it. Think about it in terms of a Venn diagram, okay? So you've got 3 different sources. You have your source 1, which is red, source 2, which is yellow, and source 3, which is blue. And if you look at that, you'll see that there are areas where they overlap, where they have some common thinking, some common positions, and that's where you get the orange, the purple, and then this is supposed to be green, but it didn't work very well. And I'm not asking you to, or requiring you to draw a Venn diagram, but I think this might be a tool you could use with your different sources, even if it's just 2. Look at where they overlap and discussing the controversy in terms of what your stakeholders have in common. That can really be an effective way to look at the issue. So we call this synthesizing by viewpoint. That's focusing on areas where the stakeholders agree and where they disagree. So what you do is you explain the viewpoint and how that viewpoint differs from other stakeholders. It allows you to compare the points of agreement and disagreement, and it shows you how everything fits together. Let's look at what Canvas says about this. I will paste the link into the chat so you can follow along if you'd like. Okay, so when we focus on viewpoints, it brings together lots of different stakeholders. Let's look at how they do it right here. Many people oppose hydrofracking because they fear it will damage the environment. Environmentalists, for instance, worry about pollution, which could hurt local wildlife. Some environmentalists also worry about the releasing of methane gas, which they argue contributes to global warming. The environmentalists' concerns are similar to those held by local residents. But instead of worrying about widespread damage to wildlife and global climate, local residents worry that hydrofracking will cause earthquakes in their backyards. Local residents also worry that hydrofracking will pollute their water supply. So what we have here are different stakeholders with different interests, different motivations. Your environmentalist is worried about protecting the environment and global warming. Your local residents are also against fracking, but they're against it because of earthquakes and because of the water supply. So you have 2 very different stakeholders with very different interests who actually have the same position, okay? So maybe you'll find that in what you are studying in your controversy. At the bottom of this, you'll see a different discussion forum. This is one that's synthesizing by focusing on the viewpoint. When I go into this, I have a different set of templates, okay? It's 2 paragraphs again, but it's really fill in the blank, and this will help you take your ideas from your sources and weave them together, all right? And both of these that you do, and these are 2 paragraphs each, both of these that you do you can just put right into your actual essay, your mapping a controversy essay. So you're doing the work here that you can use in your paper. Okay, how we doing? You have questions?
I'm doing bad, real bad.
Okay, well, tell me where you're stuck, Trishala.
Everywhere. Oh my God, this is so confusing.
It's a lot, but think about it just whichever example I gave makes sense. With the Venn diagram, with the braids, okay? Then you've got different pieces that you're gonna have to weave together, all right? You're gonna end up with at least 2 different viewpoint sources that you're going to have to weave together. That's what you're doing. Now, how do you weave them together with your words? Let the templates show you how to do that.
Okay.
Okay? Go ahead.
Can you, like, at the end, can you tell us everything that's due?
Yes, I'm about to do that.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so here's what you're going to do. First, today, you need to go find 2 more sources for your controversy. At least one has to be another viewpoint. So you should get another viewpoint, another opinion, or an editorial or whatever. And then you should get an informational article, something from a newspaper. Okay, then tomorrow, if you're sticking with my schedule, and I'm actually not going to see you until Monday, so you could do this over the weekend too. You should complete both discussion boards. You should fill out both of those templates. You can't do that though until you have multiple sources. So the first thing you have to do is get the multiple sources. Okay, you with me? Sources first, then you're going to practice with your writing. Okay, let me show you how I would get my sources. Okay, here we go. Share this how instead. So I am researching chemotherapy. Okay, I'm researching the access to chemotherapy drugs and how not everybody has access. All right, so I would do chemotherapy and drug prices. Okay, and a lot of stuff is going to come up. Now, if I want it to be a viewpoint article, I'm going to add the word opinion. Okay, and I'm going to see here, there's an article from the LA Times. Opinion. My wife's life is precious, but her chemo is too expensive. Okay, now that could be another viewpoint source for me. All right. If I'm looking for an informational article, I'm going to take out the word opinion and I'm going to get a lot of stuff. Remember, for this, I'm trying to get background information on my controversy. I've got cancer drugs cost a lot for a month of treatment. I've got stuff from cancer.gov. Anything that ends in .gov is pretty trustworthy. It's from the government. Now, I know you might have your own opinions on the government right now. I understand. But when we're looking for information, if it's published by .gov, that is going to be non-political. It's going to be science-based. Okay? That's our expectation. I might find just an article from a newspaper. So I might do New York Times. And here is an informational article about what it costs to create a cancer drug. Here's another: cancer doctors offer ways to compare medicines. Questioning a cancer drug that costs $30,000 a month. All of those are informational pieces. They're not opinion articles. They might have a stakeholder opinion in them, but the whole article itself is not a stakeholder viewpoint. So I would do a Google search to get my other articles. You can use Gale Resources. You can use the UT database, but I find personally when I'm doing that, and it looked like some students had the same problem, it can be a little overwhelming for them. There's so much information that it gives you, and it's hard to know what is going to work and what isn't. So I would stick with the Google search, and I'd look for newspaper articles and then also opinions and editorials. Then you'll submit those to me on that Google form so I can check them for you. All right. And if we're off base, then I will help you. And then tomorrow, fill out those templates. Okay. So that's what I have for us today. We still have about an hour of class left, and you should use that time to find your article. All right. I'm going to stay on all class. So if you need help, stick with me. We can do it together. If you want to stay in here and search just so you can unmute yourself and talk to me, that's fine. If you want to leave class and come back when you have a question, that's fine. If you want to reach out through Remind, I've got my cell phone right in front of me, that's fine. So you know how you work best, and I'll let you get to work. But if you have questions, stick around and let me help. And that's it. You guys can go if you want.